Hey there, folks. I want to read some things to you from Each Moment is the Universe, Zen and the Way of Being, Time by Dainin Katagiri. This is a quote from Dogen from his famous piece of writing called Uji, which means being time. The self arrays itself and forms the entire universe. Perceive each particular thing in this entire universe as a moment of time. Things do not hinder one another, just as moments do not hinder one another. For this reason, the whole world of time is arousing the way-seeking mind. The way-seeking mind is the mind that you have right now watching this video. You're trying to figure out what the world is. The whole world of the mind is arousing time. The same is true with practice and attaining the way. Thus, the self sets the self out in array and sees itself. This is the understanding that self is time. And I love that line, the self sets itself out in array and sees itself. And I had to look this up in the Japanese version, and I've forgotten exactly what word they use. But because there are different translations, and one of the more famous translations, might even be my teacher's translation, says the self sets itself in order. But I like the word array, and actually the direct translation of the Japanese word, I remember the translation, I just don't remember the word, is array. And I always think of array as a kind of display. So the self is displaying itself for itself, and that is time. That's a weird idea. So now I'm going to skip over a little bit, but it's worth reading the bit that I skipped over. Katagiri Roshi is commenting on it, and he says, "How does time turn into being or into grandeur and illumination? Who causes this to happen? We do. We can make time alive in our personal lives. Then time is not abstract. It is real, and it helps and influences daily life. How can we make time alive in our lives? Usually we set ourselves out in a small territory of life, understand it, and then we feel good. So we want to hang on to that small territory. But this is not the way to make time alive. Whether we like it or not, time is constantly freeing us from our small territory. For example, children in the first grade are freed from the first grade, and the next year they enter the second grade. The second grade doesn't keep children, so next year it's the third grade. When we realize that time gives everything the great power to emancipate itself from itself, then step by step we can make our lives mature. Instead of hanging on to our territory, we can use time to constantly develop and deepen our lives." Now that's a real interesting way to look at time. I was just watching a video on one of these YouTube channels called Big Think. And usually whenever I watch Big Think, I'm thinking, these guys aren't thinking very big. That's kind of my personal opinion. And they had a bunch of, science talking heads talking about the nature of time and whether it's a block and how it moves and all this stuff. And they were saying this idea of time being the past, present, and future all simultaneously happening at once. This has been a debate for about 100 years. And I'm going, geez. Dogen talked about that 800 years ago, and he was referencing things that were thousands of years old in Buddhism. So, yeah, maybe it's been about 100 years in the Western philosophy, but it's been a lot longer in Eastern philosophy. And they've thought a lot about time, and they've looked at time, and they've used meditation to look at time. That is one of the things that we're missing in Western philosophy. There's no real tradition of meditation. Well, now there's developing a tradition of meditation in the West, but up until, 50 years ago, it didn't exist at all. So we're using meditation to look at time. We're using our zazen to look at time as it actually happens, and we get a different sort of idea about how things happen. How different, you may ask? Well, here's another line from about a page later in this same book. Mind arousing time means when conditions are arranged and the time is ripe, timelessness appears. At that time, forms appear as formlessness. Trees are treelessness. Katagiri is katagirilessness. Katagiri being the guy who's actually speaking this stuff. And zazen is zazenlessness. Real time comes up with no gap, and zazen is a wonderful being creating cushions, people sitting next to each other, the sound of cars, all completely as one. I want to read that again because I think that's a crazy sounding line. Real time comes up with no gap, and zazen is a wonderful being creating cushions, people sitting next to each other, the sound of the cars, all completely as one. 12-hour time, which is their old-fashioned way of saying 24-hour time, never leaves its own trace. It just becomes timelessness. That is arousing time. Yeah, that's some pretty interesting stuff, and that's completely different from the way we normally understand how things work. He says that Zazen is a being that creates people on cushions to do it. And we never think in that way. But Dogen thinks that way, and he's not putting out this sort of poetic metaphor. He's actually trying to describe things as he sees them from the point of view of Zazen. And if you do a lot of Zazen, you'll start to see it from this point of view, and then when you have conversations with people, they'll all think you're weird. But that is the point of view of Zazen. One of the things Nishijima Roshi used to say was that action was fundamental, and the people and things that do action were the byproduct of action. So normally we think that I'm Brad, and because I'm Brad and I'm a human being and I'm living in Los Angeles and I can sit out here and make a video, then I'm making a video. So Brad exists first, making the video exists as a byproduct of Brad. But the way of viewing things in Buddhism is completely the opposite. That the need to make the video, the need to communicate these ideas is strong enough that it creates this person to communicate these ideas to other people, or perhaps not even other people, just elements within the cauldron of reality that think that they're people. That's some pretty strange stuff. But it is the way we view things in this philosophy. And I can only tell you my experience of it. My experience of it is when I first came across ideas like this, I thought, well, poetic metaphors or something like that, and I kind of brushed past them. You know, they weren't very important. But I kept sitting Zazen mainly because, you know, as I've said before, it helped me. I was a young person when I started it, and it helped me navigate, you know, what weird things were going on as a university student in my early 20s and you know, trying to get calm and whatever else I was trying to do. As the practice deepened, though, I read more and more of the philosophy because I thought that helped underpin the practice and make sense of it. But as I'm reading all this stuff, I'm going, what the hell are these people talking about? What is Dogen talking about? What is Katagiri talking about? What is Shunryu Suzuki talking about? I could feel that this tradition had something vital to tell me, and I could feel that this tradition was right. And I had the personal interactions with two people, well, more than two people, but mainly two people, my teachers, Tim McCarthy and Gudo Wafu Nishijima, who had both done this practice for a very long time and had some wider experience of it than I did, and more faith in it perhaps than I did. And so I kept kind of plowing on into this, and after a while, this idea that action creates the person started to make more sense than the idea of the person creating the action. Now, here I am, you know, an old person who is making these videos and writing these books and everything else that I'm doing, and I vacillate between the two positions. And whenever I vacillate into the position that goes, Brad is the fundamental thing, and then he does action, that's where anxiety appears, fear appears, all the bad things in life appear based on that point of view. But when I can slip into the other point of view that says action is fundamental and Brad is just a secondary outcome of the actions that are undertaken, then I feel better about life. Life seems to make a bit more sense, ironically, even though it sounds like a weird, you know, senseless, weird sort of idea. And things go smoothly, and I find that I'm more inclined to act ethically and take care of the things and the people around me as they need to be taken care of. And so I find that this is a better, more solid, more reliable sort of way of looking at things than what we think of as the common sense view. And I also feel that when I look at stuff like that Big Think video, and when I look at other stuff that's going on in theoretical physics and so on, I think we in the sciences and in the West and in our philosophy in the West are groping our way towards that idea. We're still kind of stuck in the darkness of this materialistic paradigm that says matter is real and everything else is secondary. But we're starting to kind of see our way through that. And I don't know if it'll take hundreds of years or thousands of years before, as a general rule, we all start to kind of see things like that and act on things as if that's the way things are. But I think once we get there, things will be lots better. Life, the universe, and everything will be lots better. And if you'd like to make my life a lot better, you can send a donation to the address that you're seeing on your screen. There goes Ziggy. He just whizzed around behind me. He will benefit from your donations because that's how we buy him dog food and dog treats and toys and things, and now I buy myself human food and human treats and things. So I really thank you for that. Don't worry about me if you're making not much money and can't donate. These are offered for free. But those of you who can donate are keeping me going, and I thank you very much for that. Have a good time all the time. See you later.